Let's do this, man.
Let's do this. Senor Jesus Jimenez.
Yes, sir. Mario, how we doing?
From Cracking Social.
Yeah, man. It's a pleasure to be here, bro. We've known each other for what, 5-6 years now?
Yeah, about that. Had
Something
a lot
like
of
that.
conversations. There's been a lot of growth between the two of us.
There has been, man. It's exciting, you know. It's cool to see the progress, development, and just I think what's cool too, man, is seeing like your vision and you staying true to what you want to do and still building, man. Because it's not obviously not easy, you know, but you care about it, and that's why you're here.
5 years later, I guess it's been when we first met.
Yeah, man.
So it's been a rough road in a lot of ways, rocky journey. Being the typical just business guy, thinking, "Oh, I can do this. I don't need to be a creative. Creatives are crazy." Man, did I underestimate what you creatives do?
Man, I'm so glad that you came to that realization because I think both are important, right? You've got to understand the business side, but I think there is a certain flavor and art to what, you know, the creative aspect is of like branding, content, all that stuff.
So it's interesting if you think back at how you and I originally met with Derek, right? So the whole logic of where Why Not Results began was the very thing that you just said. About the lack of appreciation from the business side of what the creatives do, and same thing from the creative side of what the business owners do.
Agreed.
Right? And so our whole original concept started from wanting to connect business owners with creatives. That's where it all began. With the brokerage concept is because we recognize there's a lot of really talented creatives out there, regardless of what they do, graphic designers, video, any of these things. And what they're not good at is finding clients.
The business side, yeah, absolutely.
And the business side, we really, I hate to say it like this, but struggle dealing with creatives.
I think it's an interesting relationship.
You guys can be
'cause
challenging at
sometimes
times.
I think creatives are a little bit, the ego part's definitely there. And I think sometimes, you know, things are taken in context that it shouldn't be taken in, right, from a creative side. And I think it makes that relationship interesting, to say the least.
It's a different way of thinking. I am much more analytical, much more logical path. The feeling side, like just leave your feelings out of my life. Leave my feelings out of your life. If I come at you wrong or hard, I don't mean to. It's just me being direct and it can be fairly offensive to creatives.
Well, I think the important thing, right, is like there's things to learn on both sides, like we both kind of agreed upon, and we've known each other for that long, you know. So I think from a creative side, I think what creatives can learn a lot from business people is that side of understanding, like, hey, this is unemotional. It's a business, right? We're trying to get to the objective, to the goal, to the plan. And, you know, any feedback that's taken as such is it's constructive. It's not that it's like, you know, being like torn down or anything like that. And I think a lot of times when creatives are so attached to their work, you know, because they do put their heart, soul, and everything into the work, they take it as like, oh, you're attacking me, instead of like, no, we're attacking the situation and the problem because we're trying to get to a solution. So it's not me versus you, it's me and you versus the problem. And I think that's the kind of reframe that helps people understand like what this conversation or relationship looks like.
I think that was really well said, because bringing the partnership together is what ultimately is going to create a good product.
Absolutely.
You know, I've definitely been guilty of thinking that I'm, you know, I don't know, how would I say, believing a little too highly of my abilities, and I try to do something creative and I recognize what dog shit I've created. I mean, I go back at some of the beginning things that we first did, and it was so bad. I don't know how we survived to this level here. I'm still kind of, when I look back at things we created even 2 years ago, I just get all embarrassed and kind of ashamed of the product that we put out, that we actually charge people for, because as you know, what was my motto? It's good enough.
It's good enough, yeah.
Remember that?
I do remember that.
Remember those conversations? You wanted to be all artsy-fartsy and make this high-end product and cool shit. I'm like, dude, that's not scalable. It's not. Man. You're going to have a hard time finding people to do this, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, yeah, well, your product sucks. And no one's going to want to buy it because it sucks.
I don't remember those exact words, but yeah.
I dumbed it down for you. I just paraphrased.
All right.
But it was more or less like, well, I don't like your process, Mario's. But both paths made sense.
Isn't it funny though how all of it kind of comes back full circle? Because here you are kind of doing the same thing. Here I am doing the same thing, and like we're coming to the conclusion that one side needs the other side. You know, balance.
I think you're recognizing to dumb things down a little bit, and I'm recognizing to improve quality.
I think it has to be a balance. It
And
has to be a happy medium.
Totally a
Right?
balance. Unless
'Cause
you have
it's
deep
like-
pockets.
Yeah, well, 100%, right? But those clients are hard, like you said, harder to come by, especially if you're a newer creator. You know, people who are more seasoned, absolutely, you can get more clients like that, but they're far and few between. So if you find an offer that is scalable, it makes your business and your life a lot easier because you can take on more clients, make more money, and ultimately live a less frictionless kind of, existence. Because as business owners, we're always like, okay, well, where's, because we're not sure, like, hey, where's the next thing coming from, especially in the beginning. So if we understand how to have that happy balance of like, hey, it has to be good enough, but it also has to be, we have to keep refining it and making it better. I think that's where we come to that happy conclusion of like, okay, cool, this is what we're putting out to clients, to customers, consumers, all that stuff.
Well, and I think you left off a really key word there. It's got to be affordable.
Affordable is a big,
Right.
Yeah,
That's a big part of it. And I recognize that a lot of these creatives value their time as they should. The business people definitely don't understand the amount of time and energy that goes into creating the products that you guys create. Even the pre-game plan of what you're going into, I think that's heavily underestimated. Today, before I sat down for this show, I didn't put a whole lot of thought into it, and that's going to backfire on me. Had I spent a little more upfront time, prepped up, had a better game plan coming in, I assure you this show would have been 10 times better than what it's going to be. And I think it's still going to be pretty decent conversation.
Yeah.
But I recognize that my lack of planning on the creative side really impacts my output. Garbage in, garbage out.
100%. And I had a mentor tell me, he's like, proper preparation prevents poor performance. And I think a lot of times, like you said, there's just not that understanding of like, hey, if we're going to go film any sort of video, right? It's like, hey, asking the right questions. Who's this for? Where is it going? What's happening? What do we want to create? What emotion do we want to show? And I think a lot of times there's just that, like, it's the client on the business end isn't educated on that. They think it's like, hey, you show up, you press a button, and then that's it. But it's like, as you're starting to understand right through this creative process, you're like, oh shit, there's a ton of different variables that I didn't even consider or take into factor. And it helps, like I said, I think it just comes back to education. Like if we as creatives do a better job of educating the community of business owners, I think, there's that happy medium of like, hey, okay, you want to pay this much? Okay, cool. We want to charge this much. And we come to that conclusion of like, hey, this is what the market's paying for.
And I think we got to remember that old saying, you get what you pay for.
100%.
And what good is it to spend a lot less money to have your content just fall flat?
Yeah, man. And I think you bring up a great point there because I think, it's like people think, oh, I'm just going to put stuff out, right? Which I think is good because in the beginning, you've got to flex that muscle, right? Flex that muscle of like, hey, I'm posting more, I'm getting stuff out there. But, I think that you get to a point also with that where you're like, okay, well, it's not really going anywhere. And I think that has to do with the messaging, right? The messaging of like, hey, who are we talking to? But like you said, the quality of the product, and a lot of times when you hire someone, you do get what you pay for, like there's a saying in Spanish, it's like lo barato sale caro. It's like, when you try to go the cheap end, sometimes it's a little bit more expensive. So I think it's understanding that when it comes to creation is like, hey, what you get what you pay for.
And it's so, there's so many scammers out there that are just out to turn and burn. The business owners who deal with various marketing companies who recognize that, hey, I'm only going to bring this person on for 3-4 months and they're going. So their whole business model
is churn and burn.
And so a lot of business owners who are already naive to marketing and sales and all these things to begin with and advertising, everything that comes along with it, they first encounter somebody who's going to charge them $300 a month and they expect these grandiose results, not understanding what goes into it. And then ultimately they're unhappy because they didn't, nothing came of it. And so that just put a sour taste in their mouth for the rest of their marketing life.
100%.
And which is completely foolish. Any business owner out there, you cannot, if you have any intention of being in business for a long time, you have to market. And you have to constantly evolve on your marketing and keep spending. Every year, you should be spending more and more and more on marketing. And
that's the growth engine of a business is marketing. You know, so I think if a business has a sour taste in their mouth because of an experience from a marketing agency like that, I think not only does it hurt the whole community of marketing because it's like, yeah, when they're going to work with someone else, they have that, barrier of fear. And then someone who's on a sales call has a harder time closing them. And then sometimes they'll be a pain in the ass client in the beginning because, somebody else burnt that communication and that trust. So I think what a lot of creators and, marketing agencies don't really understand is like, hey, we're in the business of growing together, like we care about building and fostering a connection with our clients, because ultimately the better that they do, the better that they perform, the longer the lifetime value of that client is. And I think a lot of people who are creative don't understand those business terms that we're talking about, because they see like, oh, I'm going to go make $500, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 on the client or whatever. But they don't see like, oh, if I foster this connection, right, and build with them for the next year and a half, the lifetime value, like how much that client's worth, is way more than $500.
And it's not to mention all the referrals that'll come out of that client,
Exactly.
in addition to the business that you're going to get from them to begin with.
100%. So I think back to that like scenario, right, that example of that marketing agency that was like, oh, I'm churn and burn. That is such a self-defeating model, because yes, can you go out there and market to more people? Can you go out there and get more clients or more people who are going to buy that $300 thing? But you're constantly in like a chase, so you develop no real traction with your product. And I think that's the important thing for creators to understand, is like, you've got to understand that your business, like you've got to understand how to productize your offer, right? Because I think if we're constantly looking like this person gets that, or, bespoke projects are cool, but if you don't understand how to productize or like really make your product exceptionally well for whoever it is that you're serving, it doesn't allow you to really build that customer base that's going to turn into referrals. It's going to turn into a huge LTV. And ultimately, if you want to exit down the road, it's going to allow you to exit because you have a pool of clients and customers that a company's going to be interested in. You have recurring revenue.
Right. Which is the goal.
Yeah, man.
We all want mailbox money.
Yeah, man.
Right. We want to be on the beach or on the golf course or wherever we want to be, on a mountain, and just have the clients fulfilled. But that's a trick to get there. And the creatives, I think, after a while, after they get seasoned in the business, they recognize that creating a scalable product is very challenging for them, because they're so good at what they do, and it's hard. Mm-hmm. They can't just you can't just teach a gift.
Correct.
You creatives that are really good at we're given and God-given gift, that's very hard to learn. Maybe over years of time, I could try to hone in a craft to try to emulate what you do, but you guys can just have a natural eye for it. And I've worked with a lot of good creatives, and you being one of them, your eye and what you see, just the angles of the shots, the colorations, you take a whole different approach to it. Whereas I'm kind of down and dirty, and I just want to make sure everybody's in the shot, and blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the day, when I look at my output, or like my footage, it's like, God, why doesn't this look right? Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't have the right tools. I didn't really spend the time to learn the tools. I didn't pay attention to the techniques that are being taught for years. And these people that go to school, and I know you take a lot of online training stuff and in-person training, and so you hone in your craft. Yeah, and so you start with a natural talent, and then you focus on honing in your craft, and there's no question. I've seen your output; it's fantastic.
I think one conversation too, man, that's kind of missed within creatives, business owners, or marketers, or whatever, is that I think we all have God-given gifts and abilities. The way that you look at business and things that you've taught me have helped me in my journey, is of understanding, like you said, affordability, because I'm like, man, I want to make this like great, do this, do that. But at the same time, I've got to be cognizant of like, can someone afford this, or what's going to be that product offering that's going to look like, So I think when it comes to a relationship with any sort of company, client, or us starting our own project or whatever company, it's like really important to ask, like, what are your strong suits and what are your skills? And is it better to, like, let's say a creative, to hire someone who's a business consultant to help them structure the business side? Because like I said, I think we both need each other. It's not like one or the other that's more important. It's like, if you really want to build an ecosystem, right, and processes and systems that are ultimately what I think is going to sell a company, right? You have to have a process of the way that you do things, and it's got to be a proven process that makes people very happy, right? Which gets you like reoccurring customers and everything else.
Right.
You've got to have both ends of the spectrum. And I think a lot of times, like I said, creatives, myself included, haven't really thought about all those pieces. They're just like, I'm looking at what's in front of me. I want to make it artistic. I want to make it look nice. What I learned in my journey is like, I can only do so much by myself. So that's why it's so important to have a team behind you, people that you can train, that are either going to be editors, creative directors, people like that, content creators, because there has to be like points in the system, right? Like if there's these 7 functions of how a video gets done, if we can have a few different people along the way, we can really build this out into a team and actually into an actual business. Because otherwise, what I ran into is I'm like taking in all this client work. And I got to the point where I didn't even want to fucking create videos anymore, because I'm like, I'm burnt out. This fucking sucks. Like, right. I was having fun with it in the beginning, and I don't like it anymore. But it's because I wasn't looking at it from, hey, yes, I'm good at this, but it doesn't mean that I have to be the one doing all the work that way. You know, I'd rather be, like you said, somewhere in Costa Rica on my laptop, overseeing the process, you know, making sure all the stuff's getting done, but making sure that the product, like you said, is a good quality product that's making people like very happy.
See, and it's so funny to hear you say that, because I had the whole opposite scenario happen to me, whereas I focused on building the team and making sure the process was there. But at the end of the day, I'm looking at the end product, end result. I'm like, we need a creative involved.
Yeah.
We're bypassing the very thing, the artist who can help make this, to take this from a 6 to a 9, right? I mean, our product was good and it's been great. I'm proud of it, but it's not. I look at other product out there and I'm like, why doesn't our stuff look like that?
It could be a little better, like you're saying.
It could be, and it's that artistic eye, you know. So you just you need both. At the end of the day, you need both. You got to have the creative and you got to have the process. And so in the two, if you can make the two come together, it's a good thing. So what I want to jump into here is another big missing component that I think most, especially small businesses, get really discouraged with marketing, right? I don't think out of the gates, they don't understand it. That's already established. They really don't understand. Nobody can really tell you the difference between marketing and sales, right? And even beyond that, I think everybody fundamentally misses the first step of this word called branding, right?
Yeah.
And I know it from firsthand experience. I've heard you say you used to drive me crazy. Still kind of drive me crazy with the word branding. I really don't like it. I think it's kind of, I think it's kind of a creative way of saying something that's not really saying anything at all.
It's a loaded word.
So I want to have that conversation with you right now to kind of understand again, let's just start from the beginning. All right. So let's just take a look and just explain to me in your mind, what do you feel branding is?
So, like you said, right, it could be a loaded word because there's so many elements of it. I think what the bare bones, idea of branding is your reputation, right? So your reputation can be a lot of things, right? It's how you show up in the marketplace, how your product looks, how your customer service is. But I think if there's one encompassing thing that it is that helps simplify the entire thing is like, how is what you're doing, what you're saying, what your logo is, how is it speaking to your audience, right? Like, what is your reputation? And I think when you boil it down, it's like, okay, well, if our reputation is something we want to be proud of, right? Like, how is it that our logo is going to show up to our ideal client avatar, and who is it that we're talking to? So branding, like you said, it's a very loaded word that sometimes can mean a lot of different things or a lot of nothing. But at the bare bones, I think it's your reputation, So if you're a person of quality and caliber, right, and you're known for someone who keeps their word, it's kind of the same thing as a business, right? If no matter what your offer is, like let's say you're a mechanic shop, if you're known to be trustworthy, reliable, if your shop is super clean from how you do, because I believe how you do anything is how you do everything, right? So if excellence is kind of your...
such a creative thing to say.
I really do believe it, man. Yeah. It's how I live my life,
it's when I hear those words, Jesus, where you just make me cringe. This is where the 48-year-olds and the 20... How old are you?
I'm 27.
And the 27-year-olds, where we're just unaligned.
Why do you say that, though? Why do you think that?
Let's not get into it. It's just so emotional and feeling. It's just so cliche.
But you know what's funny, though, man? I think it's because we talked about this because we're obviously working together right now to train a couple of different people. So I think it's funny because it's a very there's a little bit of both in there, right? It's like there's the emotional aspect, but there's also the very analytical aspect. And what I mean is like the training specific stuff that we're doing, right? Is like training editors on how to do the process of like what it is that I do. And what I'm uncovering and understanding through our process is that, there is that artsy, like whatever, right? But I think like a lot of people have more of a creator inside them. It's just they haven't been educated on what that even means, right? So a business owner who's trying to figure out what does my brand even mean, they obviously need to talk to someone to help them and ask the right questions of like, who is it you're trying to talk to? What is it you're trying to do? But I think that a lot of business owners really do have a lot more of that inside of them. They just have to be educated on that, And I think when it comes down to what we've been noticing is that a lot of businesses, right, they hop on social media, but they don't have any idea. They're just kind of like shooting all over the place. And sometimes they're not really hitting the target on one thing, So The branding aspect of it is, okay, like how are you showing up in the marketplace? Who is it that you are? And that's, like that segments into like, what are your brand colors? Who are you talking to? What's your product offering? Stuff like that. But I think it obviously, like I answered your question kind of without answering the question because it's your reputation,
Okay. It's, all right. That's one part of it. I mean, it's, to me, it's, I think for most business owners, they kind of feel like they are the brand, right? And I think that's where a lot of them, get disconnected. Like Mario's video shop.
Well, see, I think that's where I'm glad you brought that up because I think the brand is a living entity in itself. It has a personality, it has a way of dressing itself, right? Like dressing itself, meaning like the offer and everything else, right? But I think a brand kind of is like a person, and I think a lot of times the reason from my understanding, right, of why companies can't exit is because they're so attached to the founder, right? So if it's like this
100%.
person's, whatever tire shop, like it's like Ernesto's tire shop can only scale so much without Ernesto, right? Or whatever. So it's like, I'm glad you brought that up because I think there does have to be that distinction between like this is the business, as an entity, and this is the person who founded it.
And there's no question, and that is a big challenge when you go to sell a business. And most business owners aren't thinking of that. They're just going to work their business, work their income. They're looking at it as a job, as a career, more than they're looking at it as an investment, as an asset that they're trying to build up with the sole intention of selling.
100%.
Because at the end of the day, if you're in business to sell.
Yep.
And if you can sell your widgets along the way to make income, but then on the backside have something of value, but you have to create that core value. And I think that's what I've learned through this process that is what branding is to me.
Correct.
I think you said it right. By getting that brand, that business entity known as a separate entity. So they're not buying Mario, they're buying what Why Not Results stands for, and all the resources it comes with, and the associations of all the good reputable people that are involved that go, that if you're working with Why Not Results, you must be a reputable human being.
Yeah.
And so for our brand, and it's kind of interesting because I've really struggled with like, because we're so versatile. We do a lot. So I think it's pretty easy for certain businesses to say, I sell cupcakes, and you go figure out, who buys cupcakes, and you find your client avatar. Well, who likes cupcakes? Well, in the case of this marketing business, marketing such a huge, massive spectrum of product offerings that all need to come together harmoniously to actually do the job together.
For sure.
Right? And that's what's really challenging about marketing and that's why you have a marketing agency out there, because the marketing agency does all the spokes. We've really fought being an agency. We don't want to become an agency, everything in-house. So we've really strongly tried to work in more of a brokerage capacity, recognizing that people that own their own businesses, typically they have a lot of pride. They do a lot of, they're going to go the extra mile to protect their personal reputation.
For sure.
Versus an employee who works for me who's like, well, I'm protecting your Why Not Results reputation. So we really like working and partnering up with other business owners to, again, work in more of an agency concept, but a brokerage reality. So that way, we know, hey, Jesus Jimenez creates this kind of splash video, and he's a little more expensive than this other entry level guy who's going to shoot some basic stuff. So we can pivot, and that's proven to be pretty a direction we like to go. But it's also been personally a struggle for me to understand what is our brand. How do I describe what Why Not Results is? Who is our target avatar when there's so many different avatars in there? So from a branding perspective, I've personally really struggled with what it is. And I think what we really want to be known for, and I know Jimmy would agree with this, is we want to be known as, you come to us, we're going to fulfill on what we said we're going to fulfill on.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah,
and that's really part of our core.
I think that's part of your brand promise, right? Like that's a promise you're making to clients who work with you. But I think as I'm hearing this kind of unfold, right, with given like the e-commerce experience that I've had and like other friends in the field, they said that like you should always search for the audience and the problem that they need, right? And that's where you kind of work backwards. And that's where you build your product from. So I think when you're trying to understand like what is it that our brand is, right? Like what is it that you're going to be known for the best in your space? And I think where I've kind of gone wrong is as a creative agency, right? Like on the video side, I can go make real estate videos. I can go make commercials. I can go make all these different sub segments of what this is: action, sports, whatever, weddings. But is like you said, your reputation, your brand. Me, when I was involved in so many different product offerings, I'm like, I can't be known for the best, like this, like conversion based videos is what we do for advertising, right? Like that's part of our brand. So I think in an interesting way, also like what branding is when it comes to your guys' thing is like dialing in that product offering of like, this is what we do, and this is who we do it for. And then working backwards from those things and then building out the brand that way, from the client experience to when the client does engage with your brand, right from start to finish, meaning on the sales call, when they onboard everything, is it in line with what your brand is and your brand promise, which is, like you said, you want to over deliver, and whatever it is that they're paying for, you want to supersede the value of whatever it's costing them. Because I think that's when someone is staying with you, right? If they pay you $500, but they're getting $2,000 worth of value, for them, it's a no-brainer. And I think a lot of times, creatives don't actually think about that. They're just like, oh, I made you this really pretty looking video. But I'm like, is this video doing anything for the people? And I think that's where sometimes there's a disconnect between the business owner and the creative, where we're not understanding from the beginning what our objective is, and if we're clear on our objective, we can understand like, hey, did this video do what we said it was going to do?
Well, I think it's pretty hard for you to be expected to do that when most businesses don't spend the money and upfront energy to determine what is their brand.
100%.
You know what I mean? So I think we kind of set up the creatives and other marketing agencies to fail when we miss that first component. And I'm really recognizing this personally, right? And so even with our new product offering that we're launching out, it's big conversations that Jimmy and I have a lot are like about working with the branding guys. I'm personally of the opinion that we really need to, this is a perfect product for guys who are in the branding space, because we end up dealing with people that come in here who think they know what they want to come across as, but ultimately they're not really thrilled with their output because they're not settled with who they are to begin with.
100%.
Right? They don't really know what am I ultimately trying to deliver, and I think internally with our clients, because we're not necessarily focused on branding. Right? We don't just sit there and hone in on branding. We kind of gloss over and do like a general brand, and so it comes across. But I definitely think that the output would be better from anybody who had a core branding entity that they worked with.
I think there's an interesting conversation in what you brought up that kind of came to mind when there's a saying that says, right, like most business problems are personal problems. So a lot of times the business isn't scaling because of something like within us or whatever, right? So it's like if we're scared to invest, if we're scared to do this, if we're scared to, pull the trigger on this new line or this new marketing thing or whatever it may be, right? Like sometimes there's our own limitations that kind of play into like what the business is. And that's why it's important, like I said, there's that disconnect, right? Where it's like, this is its own entity and this is me. If this is failing, this is not connected with me as a failure or whatever else, because I think that happens a lot with business owners too. But when it comes down to that conversation, man, I just think it's so important to like understand that, because I think that the more that we understand that separateness, the more that we can understand how to navigate the problems that do come up and come to mind when it comes to business, right? In the sense of like, okay, if we're here now and we're trying to get to here, like it's got to be independent of me, kind of like what we were talking about before.
Right. Yeah. Push the business, not yourself.
Yeah, man. So it's interesting, but it has to be connected but disconnected,
You call it interesting, I call it annoying.
Annoying?
This is a side of it that drives me batty, right? I just want to get in, I want to get straight to the meat and potatoes. I don't want to deal with, whatever, growing a cow that's going to make the milk, right? That's ultimately that I'm going to put in my gravy.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? I don't want to deal with all that. And the branding, I think, is really starting at the core beginning and getting that little baby calf and raising that little calf up. I mean, it takes it a while to figure out, get it trained, ultimately so you can get your end output.
Yeah.
Which is cream for your gravy.
Yeah.
To just put it metaphorically. It's so to me, it's annoying.
Yeah.
And I think
to most people.
I think to most business owners especially, it seems like a waste of money, which is really ironic when they'll put hundreds of thousands of dollars into their business and products, and they'll have failure after failure after failure, but they keep investing because they believe in themselves, they believe in their concept, yet they don't want to spend the few $1,000s up front to have somebody come in and help them really determine what they stand for.
I think where I was trying to get to with that little last point, and it just came back to mind, is I think a lot of times people are just unclear about who they are. And sometimes, like, I know it's the whole emotional and business aspect, right?
Here
and
you go
analytical,
again.
right?
Here you
But
go.
think about it though,
Emotional.
right? If people are unclear about what they are, they're unclear about what the fuck their business does. And sometimes they're like, yes, they're willing to spend, like you said, hundreds of thousands of dollars on this product line, this, that. But I think it's funny, man. Like, I think when it comes down to like figuring out what the business is, right? We ask a lot of the right questions about, like, what is it that you're trying to do, right? The mission statement, all those different things. Why is it that you even got into business? That's a great question to understand, because like I said, it's a business in the beginning is an extension of yourself. So until we disconnect it from ourselves, that limiting belief that people have, right, or whatever, if they don't know themselves or they're not willing to invest in themselves, I think a lot of times when people aren't willing to invest in themselves, they're not willing to invest in their business, So that's kind of the difficult conversation to navigate with people, is like, you've got to figure out how to ask the right questions that are tough questions, that you want to have very clear answers on, but you also have to ask them in a tactful way where, you're not triggering something that's maybe within them of why they haven't grown in their business for the last 2-3 years or whatever it may be, for whatever, tire shop, whatever, and I think at the end of the day too, it's important for creatives and business owners, right, who are marketing like agencies or whatever, to understand that sometimes it's the wrong person that you're talking to,
Yeah, and sometimes the business just doesn't need it.
Yeah.
They're at a content point. They're happy.
Completely comfortable. They're completely happy. And if you're trying to sell someone on something that they don't want to be sold on, you're not going to make the sale. But there has to be some sort of pain in there.
But if you are that business owner who is looking to grow a business and sell that business, I personally believe that you are very foolish if you've skipped the branding step, which I have.
Which is funny that we're having this conversation and you're so adamant about this, because like I know your views were a lot different back then, like 5 years ago.
And I'm definitely recognizing more and more how we're creating a lot of content, but because we really haven't determined what is the end goal and the message other than selling a product, right? I think we've missed that step. And I don't say completely we've missed it. I just don't think we've really spent a whole lot of time honing it in.
For sure.
Right. And so, and so I think that's most businesses, and other businesses naturally like we've gravitated to creating our brand, you could say, over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
But it's not like we set out. I should have out of the gates 5 years ago. What does this look like? Again, originally, when I think back to our original plan, going back to the beginning of the conversation, it was to bring businesses and creatives together.
For sure.
Right. And that was a slogan. That was a brand. Right. And we deviated from that. And just recognizing that was going to be a slow roll. Right. And that didn't really mean much to people.
Yeah.
Right. They couldn't really connect. How does that make sense for me?
I think that's a great slogan, by the way, connecting businesses and creatives. I think it's just about fostering, because I think a lot of what business is community, right? When you build a brand, you build a community, and you've got to ask, like, who are these people and what the fuck do they care about? That's independent from my own thoughts and what I care about. Because if we're asking that question of like, we're connecting business owners and creatives, like, okay, how can we foster relationships with creatives based on what they care about? Should we be hosting monthly workshops? Should we be creating guides and resources? And in the same end, like for business owners, should we be somehow educating them somehow with this, and we're kind of the bridge for these two people, and our business is the bridge for these two people. Because like you said, at the end of the day, like it just makes sense. Like your product offering is something that business owners and creatives both need. Like someone who's a branding guy can easily go out and sell your service because it's what they don't want to do. Like myself, right? Like I like talking about the brand and what needs to happen when it comes down to the execution of the actual minute details. Like, because I don't have the team or care to build out the team for my own agency, would much rather hire someone who's like a referral partner who's going to help me build that side of the business because it just makes sense, But I just think it comes down to a lot of different things, man. And I think when you're building a brand, like you really are building a community. And I think a lot of business owners sometimes don't see it that way, which gets a little bit muddy because at the end of the day, we're in business to serve people, I think, right? Obviously, we need to make a profit, but I think a profit is made by providing value to people, because that's a value exchange, right? If it like I said before, if it supersedes the value that you're paying for, you're going to keep paying for it, right? But if it goes with your identity, right? If someone's like used to, for example, wearing a certain type of clothes or whatever, the reason why I think they wear that type of clothes is because it goes with their identity of who they are for the most part, right? For people who have a little bit more means to be able to afford that. So, people who are part of this group who are either dads, who are like fitness enthusiasts, who are car enthusiasts, whatever, everyone kind of wears something that signifies, hey, this is part of like my community. This is part of who I am, right? And I think a good brand does really well is it helps people kind of wear that as a badge, right? Like, oh, if they're doing business with Why Not Results, they're this kind of person, they're in this kind of community, this kind of hub, right? So I think it's obviously a deeper question to unfold than just like a smaller conversation, right? Like for a podcast, but it's very important to just even go into it with that understanding of like, okay, like what is the brand association that's happening with my brand? When someone buys from me, like, are they wanting to buy from me because of how they feel and like what it communicates to the world, you know? And I know some people, like, it sounds silly, but it's like some people won't wear Nikes, some people won't wear Jordans, some people won't wear like whatever thing because that it just doesn't go with their worldview. So it goes into a much deeper conversation, right? Of like people's, you know, client avatar profiles and all that stuff. But it's like, it's really understanding, man. Like, you know,
well,
like
I'm gonna say,
and everything.
I'm going to say this right now. I'm going to regret saying this, and it's on camera. I agree with you, Jesus. And you guys have no idea how much I hate saying that to Jesus right now, but I agree with you. I remember having these fledgling conversations 45 years ago. I'm like,
but listen,
you're
man,
so full of shit. The
thing is,
and now here I am, like, recognizing, like, yeah, this is actually very important.
But the thing is, though, I agree with you. You know, when it comes to all the different business sides and everything else that we've already had conversations on, it's so important to understand both sides of the spectrum, right? Because if you can't make something that's like scalable, right? You can make the best anything, right? Let's say you have the best brand or whatever.
I've been waiting for this to happen someday just to hear how it come through and sound on the
That's
clips.
a special moment, huh?
So I'm kind of curious to see how strong that was.
There you have it, folks. But yeah, man, like I was saying, you know, I think, like I said, it's both sides need each other, man. So as much as like I appreciate you saying that, it's like you're right. You're just as right as I am, you know?
Well, this is I think this is the tip of the iceberg on these conversations. I think we both have different viewpoints that people can relate to, and there'll be those on my side of the fence who can't relate to you are going to be happy to kind of hear me call you out on some of your viewpoints, and vice versa.
For sure.
You know what I mean? To kind of get a better understanding of the value that we all bring to each other. So on that note,
dude,
I think this is a great start. And I look forward to hearing more about the branding and all the other things that you can teach us that you've learned over these years that you've been working on your craft. So
dude, I appreciate that, man. Thank you for having me on. You know, it's always a pleasure, always an honor. Yeah. Great conversations, man. And I'm excited for what you're about to build.
Right on, brother.
Let's get it.
Thank you.